I want to ask you, what are the things that you dream about in life? And what are the things that you would hope for and long for in life? Do you think there's something of a cruelty to life in what happens if you don't get the things that you long for? Or maybe even a certain cruelty for the things that you do long for. Maybe some of you are writing Christmas lists at the moment, but we know by like February half term, all the stuff that we've kind of been longing for and hoping for ahead of Christmas is sort of forgotten about. We can't even remember the things that we got for Christmas come February. And I want to say, if you're young and writing Christmas lists, that is part of the cruelty of life. Our hearts long for stuff, whether it's material wealth, the lottery win, or the long holiday, or the satisfaction of praise at our job, or maybe even the intimacy of sex, or whatever it is. And yet we know, even if you get all those things, you can't bottle it and keep it. Like it arrives and you get it for a moment, and then the ache that you have in your soul is not fundamentally answered by the possession of the thing that you've longed for. That's part of the cruelty of life. And I mentioned last night, there is a kind of casual Christianity where notionally we might call ourselves Christians or think of ourselves as Christians, but we never really lean into Christ and kind of experience that aching in our soul being answered by him. We don't thirst for Jesus to be the one that fills the void. We're too busy trying to fill it with everything else that we can in life. And I wonder whether part of the reason that we've got Song of Songs in the Bible is to say, it's a kind of a woo, to say, come, find what you're looking for in Jesus. This is the great love song he has for his church. And so I think there are two real difficulties that are presented in this passage, okay, that we might have. And I want to kind of explore these two difficulties through Song of Songs. The first difficulty is the need to give yourself to another, the need to give yourself to another. And then secondly, we'll look at the second difficulty, which is the need to go and search, okay, the need to go and search. But the first thing is the need to give yourself. One of the things that made me nervous about preaching through Song of Songs is I just don't know what to do with the points that seem difficult, whether these kind of points of tension through the song, which you get in chapter 2 and 3. So this is sort of sections that as I was sort of plotting out how this might go, these were parts that I was planning on avoiding. And yet, actually, as I've looked at it more and more, I thought, no, these are the points where we need to look into and press into. So first difficulty, the need to give yourself. The need to give yourself. Now, the poem is Song of Songs, chapter 2. Okay, we've got to remember it's rich and beautiful in its language as a poem is, and it reminds us, it sort of reinforced for us that we shouldn't just read this as a soppy love song. There's a temptation to read Song of Songs and write it off and go, well, it's not very helpful for me. I'm not in this phase of life anymore. I'm not going to read it as a soppy love song, whatever. And I think we've got to remember, no, these are hyper-real characters. This isn't just about kind of two teenagers in love. There's something significant to all of this. And I wonder if it's in chapter 2, it's the start of spring. It's this idea that winter is over and it's the hope of longings finally being answered, okay? And verse 8, listen, my beloved, look, here he comes, leaping across the mountain, bounding over the hills, okay? So this is the woman longing for her fiancé to come and visit her and for them to be united and maybe for their love to be consummated. And as she watches him come from over a distance, it's a sign of kind of how urgent, or his urgency in getting to her is a sign of kind of how intense the love is, okay? So I sort of imagine the BFG kind of leaping across the mountains on his way over. He's not in love, is he? That doesn't help. Or maybe I imagine Alita Adams. Do you remember... this is so ages me. From 1991, that song, Get Here If You Can, that kind of, there are hills and mountains, and you can use different various forms of public transport that she lists that you can go through to get here and all that sort of thing. It's okay. It's a recent reference. It was covered by Sam Smith a couple of years ago. So anyway, it works, okay? And that's what you're supposed to imagine. But as he arrives, okay, there's a problem in verse 9. My beloved is like the gazelle or a young stag. Look, There he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, peering through the lattice. And there's something weird, because even as he's now got close, okay, he's run over the mountains, he's crossed the streams, he's sung the Alita Adams song, and when he gets there, there's a wall, there's a gate. Things get stuck, and she can't get to him, he can't get to her. I remember once, a friend of ours, so Sam Johnson, who sadly passed away just before the pandemic, he once came to our house just to drop in and say hello. And he knocked on our door, and I could see it was Sam from the outline on the other side of the glass, and I could not for the life of me find my house keys. And the front door was locked. And I remember actually having to climb out of the window at the front of the house just to say, hello, Sam. And he said, hi, I've just come to pop over. And I thought, you're in your 70s. I'm not going to welcome you in. I can't, we're not, that's going to not work, okay? Now, for her here, okay, it's not that she's lost the key. It's that suddenly he has to kind of persuade her, because here at the key moment, there is something holding her back. She doesn't want to go with him. Maybe it's the fear that winter is still lingering around, or losing the comfort of home. There's suddenly a fear, a reluctance. There's something within her that holds her back, because he has to say to her in verse 10, arise, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. See, the winter is past. The rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth. The season of singing has come. The cooing of doves is heard in our land. The fig tree forms its early fruit. The blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Arise, come, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. She's watching from afar, excited, full of anticipation. But when the reality of what has been hoped for is actually there, knocking on the door, when it's actually offered, she's afraid. And he says, come with me. The journey is nothing to be afraid of. There's a feast out here, if only you're willing to take the step. And we'll go and we'll enjoy it together. And so he speaks in verse 14. My dove is in the clefts of the rock, in the hiding places on the mountainside. Show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Catch for us the foxes, the little ones that ruin the vineyards, our vineyards that are in bloom. What is he saying? He's saying she's like a reluctant dove hiding in the cleft of a rock. You know, the kind of the bird that pops its head out and it knows it's going to have to kind of leap out of the nest. But it's like, not yet. There might be an eagle. I'll leave it another day. There might be some risk out there that I'm not willing to take. I'm not sure whether my wings are going to hold me. There's risk, there's danger. And can I ask you, if this couple are deeply in love, how do you feel reading this? Don't you feel deeply, agonizingly frustrated? You're like, oh, you don't know youth until it's gone. Why are you being such an idiot? Just go for it. Enjoy it. Don't you know how rare and precious and valuable it is? Steve Carell tells this wonderful story of when he met his wife, and he really, really liked her, but he was so shy and he couldn't ask her out on a date. And so he wound up having this ridiculous conversation with her where he said, if a guy like me were ever going to ask any girl on a date, it would be a girl like you. I mean, and you sort of hear the story and just, don't you think, oh, come on, get over it. You know, just ask her out. You know, it's so, but that's what we do, isn't it? We try and hold back and protect our hearts at all costs. And we daren't put our hand into his and say, I'm risking it all, whatever it is, wherever it leads. I was on a call earlier this week with someone they'd been offered a job that they'd been longing for ages, and they finally got offered it. But even in being offered it, he now felt desperately torn. I don't know do you ever feel like that? What's the fear that holds us back? What is it that just stops us from kind of letting go and just going for it? And I think we do the same with Jesus, don't we? I mean, that's what Song of Songs is really all about. If ever a guy like me were to have a religion, it would be with a God like you. That's what we sort of end up saying. And it's so inadequate. Because you'll never really know what it's like to have your heart fulfilled unless you're willing to kind of take the step and say, yeah, come on, I'm going to put it all on the line. Let's go for it. And you might think, well, who would be like this about Jesus? If Jesus is so good, who would be like this about Jesus? And the answer is us. Think about the New Testament message. If you ask any Pharisee in the New Testament, what does your heart most long for in all the world? And what would a Pharisee tell you? Well, I'm waiting until the day comes when finally we get to see the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. They're like, great. And what are you doing today? Oh, we're just crucifying this heretic, Jesus, That's what we do. We long for a God. And when he comes along, we think, well, I'll keep my distance. We long for a God. What kind of God do you long for? We dream for a God who would listen and understand the human experience. Oh, I long for a God who would take issues of justice seriously. Oh, I long for a God who would defeat the anxiety and the fears that I have in the deepest reaches of the soul. Oh, I long for a God who would take on my worst enemies in death or hell or evil. Or I long for a God who understands human frailty. Or I long for a God who takes my life in a good direction. And when he arrives and he's here, what does he find? He finds us like a church behind the veil, keeping him imprisoned, locked in the next room while we decide what to do with him. Decide whether he's really worthy of our love or whether he's sufficiently good or sufficiently trustworthy. And all the time, what does Jesus do? He implores us. Listen, winter is gone. There's nothing left to fear. Walk with me. Trust me. Let me supply your needs. You don't need to trust in everything else anymore, of sex or stuff or shopping. You don't need to mess around in sin. You don't need to control every element of your life. You don't need to worry about the future. You don't need to constantly try and function as God of your own life because I'm here. But it's really, really hard to believe it. T.S. Eliot once wrote in his sort of epic poem, The Wasteland, says this about spring, okay? The months when it feels like life is resurrection, where you're seeing, where I always remember the first day every year when I finally feel warm outside. I don't know whether you have that thing. This is what T.S. Eliot wrote about spring. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Because hope, I think he's saying hope is always unfulfilled without Christ. There's a certain kind of cruelty. Every year you're reminded of hope, and every year you have this relenting sense that hope goes unfulfilled. That is the human experience without Christ. And it's hard. So when Christ comes along, it's hard to have the guts to say, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to follow. I'm going to go on the adventure that is life with God. It's easier, isn't it, to be like the dove hiding in the cleft of the rock. Oh, I don't want to follow you. There might be an eagle. Winter might be lingering. I'm not sure I can trust you. There might be suffering on the journey. I'm not sure I can trust you. Life might go on a direction I don't want it to go on. I'm not sure I can trust you, Jesus, because I'm not sure you're good. And just like with this couple in Song of Songs, I think we're supposed to read it and be frustrated. Say, come on, just do it, just go for it. Let yourself go for once. Walk with Jesus. You have nowhere else you can go. There isn't another love for your soul that is going to satisfy you. So why hold back now? And so Song of Songs, he's come to collect his bride, and he is the one that we have devoted our lives longing for, hoping for, dreaming for, longing for this moment, longing to be joined to Christ. And what do we do when he arrives? I keep my distance. I stay in the next room. I'm not sure how I feel about this. And maybe it's been a long time since you prayed. And I mean, really prayed that you will enjoy life with Jesus. That you will sit down with him and enjoy him and let him take him on the journey that he wants to take you on. Verse 15 has this lovely little phrase, catch the young foxes, the foxes that eat the young stems of the vineyard. And what's going on? The foxes prevent the vineyard from being productive. And it's actually really self-destructive, though the foxes don't know it. The buds in spring out of the vineyard taste great to a little fox who's hungry. But the irony is, if they let the buds grow and flourish, the sugary fruits that they get later on in the season would be so much better. So I think this is a kind of a little phraseology that's working really, really hard in the song to say, don't let the things that seem so good in the here and now be the things that prevent you from enjoying the spiritual riches that will come later in the year. Basically, it's a way of the song saying, don't settle for less than Christ. Of course, it's hard to pray. Of course, it's easy to neglect prayer. It is much easier scrolling through Instagram than it is to pray. It's this little fox that cuts off the thing that would actually help you and keep you going. So much easier daydreaming and investing in your home or, hoping in your job to satisfy you or looking through the adverts for a new job. It's so much easier to seek out endless little pleasures now just to keep you going through the day than it is to actually pursue Christ. But he is the one who answers the longing in your soul. So this is the first problem, the need to give yourself, okay? That's I think, part of chapter 2. But there is an agony, okay? What happens if you think, well, I've given myself, but it doesn't solve this ache in the soul? So this is difficulty 2. Let's go on and look at this really briefly. The need to go and search. The need to go and search. It's a slightly different problem. Some people have suggested this is some sort of dream sequence in chapter 2 or something like that. I just think we should take it for what it is. Beautiful love poetry that has symbolism that is for Christians about Christ and the church. So it's got a different solution, though, to the first one. So chapter 3 says, all night long on my bed, I looked for the one my heart loves. I looked for him, but could not find him. I will get up now and go about the city through its streets and squares. I will search for the one my heart loves. So I looked for him, but did not find him. So this time, the woman's in bed, and she's in the place where I think intimacy is supposed to happen, but he isn't there. And there's some sense that she's waiting for him, longing for him, but he doesn't show up. And I think it describes a different situation. I don't think we're supposed to read this and think, oh, they've had some sort of lover's tiff and he's stormed out and had a huff and that's for whatever reason. I don't think we take it as that. Just for whatever reason, he isn't here, and that causes her an immense amount of grief. So she longs for him, and in the end, she leaves the house and she goes on a quest to go and find him. She goes looking for him in the empty streets of the city at night to find where he is. Maybe this is distressing for us because we can't help think, well, hold on, if this is about our relationship with God, surely God is endlessly available. Okay, that's just an undeniable thing about God. Like, he is always available whenever I need him. And yet, actually, I wonder whether in chapter 3 we're supposed to understand we go through seasons and moments where we are waiting on God. And there is some sense that we just experience silence in the answers to our prayers. And in those moments, we have this kind of doubt or fear. Is God there? Is he with us? Is he still for us? Does he still care about us? Psalm 30 says, Lord, when you favored me, you made my royal mountain stand firm. But when you hid your face, I was dismayed. When you hid your face, I was dismayed. Now, I don't think we should read this and think, oh, well, God is just playing hide and seek with his people. You seek him here, you seek him there, you seek him there, But I just think it's a reality that every Christian experiences dark moments in the midst of grief and illness and, something hopeless and disastrous happening to us, or just the crunching drag of anxiety or depression, where we just sense this kind of distance with God. that can't just be put down to sin. In fact, I think we need to be very careful of Song of Songs, of thinking that every day with Jesus is like the first flush of youthful love and romance, when it's not. Because we're not in Eden anymore. In Eden, God walked with Adam and Eve. There is something now that kind of grows through the groans of life in the heart of every Christian, where we are developing a desire for heaven, because we realize that the hugs and comforts of friends now are not the same as the hug and comfort of seeing face to face our Savior. And there is this brooding longing that you see on the faces of older believers who have been waiting for a long time. They're now, I love that passage at Christmas, Anna in the temple, I can die in peace because my eyes have seen the salvation of the Lord. Say, until I fix my eyes on the resurrected Savior in person, I am not at home. And so perhaps this is not an unusual part of the Christian life, that we find ourselves crying out to God, screaming, "Where are you, Lord?" in the midst of this, whether it's tragedy or difficulty or heartache or pain. And what do you do to that? How do you respond to that? The temptation for most of us, certainly for me, is to wallow, say, well, God has deserted me. Or we might be quick to faithlessness and sin, and we wallow in self-pity and anything else. But I think Song of Songs is written to us to say, and that is not how the church is supposed to respond. We're supposed to pursue him. Perhaps he withdraws for a time, not to punish us because he's cruel or something, not at all, but to give us the opportunity to really pursue him, to see how void the other areas of life are, to seek and to find and to hope and to long and to help our hearts beat for him again. He demands something from us, that our love is not cheap or easy or casual. We think like Job, I need to pursue him and search him and seek him out. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds of the city. This is verse 3. Have you seen the one my heart loves? Scarcely I'd passed them when I found the one my heart loves. I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him to my mother's house. She's looking for him around the city. She says to the watchmen, they were kind of the closest equivalent to the police, the people who kind of watch over the city at night to make sure it's not going to be attacked. And they can't find him. They haven't seen him. But she does. And what's different when she finds him? She clings to him. She binds herself to him. She will not let him go. In fact, she drags him to her mother's house almost to say, I am never losing you again. I am not taking my eyes off you. If I go to sleep, my mum is going to keep watch on you. I don't know what it is. And actually, the imagery of the rest of chapter 3 is like a royal wedding. And actually, I think chapter 3 is about a vision of heaven, of the church saying, now we have found him and we see him face to face, and everything is settled with Jesus and everything is put right because this feeling of distance is gone. That fear of our hearts isn't settled until that moment. And I guess as I finish, what I want to challenge us all with is just to ask, what does it mean for us to pursue Jesus when he feels distant? Surely it means we pray. Surely it means we read his word. Surely it means that we meet with one another to help point us the way. And surely it means we long for heaven because we know Jesus is not physically with us in this life, but he has not abandoned us by his Spirit. And we are relying on and walking in the promises that he has made every day. And that is hard. But let's not give up on the hope that he has left us. Song of Songs is God's love song for his church. He can be found. He does comfort his people. Not every sense of distance from God goes unfulfilled. So I want us now to seek him and find him out.